Started. So thank you everyone and welcome to our part 3 episode of Bridge Over Troubled Waters. Today I'm delighted to share that we have a special guest, Paul Abrahms from Huron Consulting Group, who will be talking to us particularly about how talent acquisition teams can navigate through the COVID-19 crisis. And our discussion today is really going to be focused on understanding his perspective uniquely as a TA leader in the organization. Before we go ahead and get started, I just want to remind everybody of a couple key things. So one is we've got all participants on mute. We'll be having about 30 minutes to go through a dynamic discussion with Paul. We're going to learn a lot about what it means to lead through crisis and what to do and perhaps what not to do. We're going to learn together, and we encourage everyone to submit your questions through the Zoom group chat. We'll kind of take it from there. About the last 15 minutes, we'll have open Q&A. You're welcome to submit those questions that way. And we'll kind of see you on the other side of the next 45 minutes. So without further ado, I really want to introduce our special guest. So Paul Abrahms joins us as the VP of Talent Acquisition at Huron Consulting Group. He leads a 40-person team of about 120 HR folks in the entire enterprise and successfully hires almost 1,000 people annually through his internal recruiting efforts. He also leads all the corporate executive recruiting and search efforts, and his team supports both campus as well as experience and executive recruiting across all of Huron's practice lines and service lines. Over the last 25 years, Paul actually has been a subject matter expert in recruiting strategy and delivery. And prior to his time at Huron, has worn the recruiting hat in a couple of organizations such as CCC Information Services, ADP, Deloitte, and Inforte Corporation, as well as working at JP Morgan Chase and eLoyalty as an executive recruiter himself. Paul started his career in recruitment, executive retained search as well, and is a nationally recognized speaker and leader with multiple mentions and awards through HRO, Today, LinkedIn, and Star Chicago. He and I share a really big passion for mentorship, both formally and informally, where he spends a ton of his time internally mentoring talent at Huron, but also within the broader talent acquisition community. And I do a similar effort here in the Charlotte community where I live through the Pink Mentor Network. So I'm thrilled to welcome Paul. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
When I heard about this opportunity to just talk about talent acquisition leadership and some of the challenges we're all faced with, I was really excited to do that and to be a part of this. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm happy to have you here, and I'm going to stop the screen sharing, and we're going to just share our faces together. So I want to get started so I can see you. So Paul, the number one question that's been on everyone's mind lately is really, how are you managing a team through such a significant change organizationally? And so I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about what Huron's doing. In general, how are you addressing COVID? What's shifted for the business? And help me understand, what leadership looks like, today versus 6 weeks ago.
So let me first give a perspective of Huron and what our businesses are. Huron's been around for 20 years. We spun out of Arthur Andersen. And so our core is really management consulting, professional services. And throughout the last 20 years, we've really evolved into half of our company is healthcare consulting, everything from the strategy side to growth and innovation to operations improvement, technology, leadership transformation. And we have those components in each of our industry groups. So healthcare would be 50% of our company, education would be another 20%. And then the other groups we call our other commercial sectors and general business advisory. It could be everything from strategy and disruption innovation to technology. We do a lot of work across financial systems and creating financial dashboards for senior leadership teams, and then very strong on the CRM, Salesforce arena, and we introduce those into our core industries. So from an industry standpoint, we're not only big in healthcare, education, life sciences, but we also do a lot of work in financial services, the energy utility industry, and then other industrial, commercial type companies. So I would say 70% of our businesses or more are directly impacted by what's going on within the COVID pandemic. And so we kind of have a unique seat at the table in that we're trying to really help our clients solve some of the immediate issues they've had. So from a technology perspective, because we create these executive dashboards for the CFO's office, we've been creating tools for many of our clients that help get better visibility into basically modeling their business and what's the impact of COVID now and going forward. We've been leveraging Salesforce tools and technologies to help hospitals create dashboards as they report instances and have to report to the government. They're able to do that through our tools, and a number of other things that have been, we think, really impactful for solving the immediate problem.
Yeah. It sounds like you're really on the front lines, and you've also had to pivot to bringing all your people, instead of being on the line, they've also had to move virtually themselves, right?
Right. So we've got 4,000 employees. We're about just under $1 billion in revenue. So sizable organization. And we pivoted from basically everyone being out in client sites or in offices to working remote. And we did this in, almost immediately. So it was not an easy undertaking, but not something unique to us. I think every industry's, faced with the same challenge.
Yeah, everyone kind of had to pivot on a dime, and some maybe are still in the space of pivoting, and others maybe are starting to settle into their new normal. What's been, since we're talking about, leading TA teams, I'm curious just what has been the overall communication approach from a leadership standpoint that that has driven kind of your own strategy and how you approach your teams.
So fortunately, I would say that Huron's fortunate to have a really strong culture, and we're very collaborative to begin with. We're very transparent. We try to be authentic. So, and we're also consultants. So the majority of the employees are consultants. So when we're given a crisis, the consulting mindset plays in. And when we think of traditional change management, it really starts with at the top. So it's really in 3 prongs: our executive leadership team, our corporate leaders, and then our business unit or practice leaders. And so I think from day one, there were weekly meetings or daily meetings with the executive leadership team to make sure that there were alignment on what the current state was and what do we need to get it to the next state. And so those daily briefings, I set the tone for the organization. Our CEO had all company calls every 2 weeks to give clarity around where we were, how we're doing, and try to put people at ease that we're going to be okay. And then each of the corporate functions had their own internal meetings. So as a part of the HR leadership team, we met daily as well, check-ins, how are we doing, how's our team doing, and then make sure that we're cascading that type of communication to our teams so they're feeling the same sense of connectivity to there actually is a plan in place, we're going to be okay, and what we're doing to address the challenge at hand.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're sharing is, there's so many different layers of communication, and you're in charge of a group of 40 folks, particularly in talent acquisition. How have you changed or modified your communication style or leadership style in this new world within your team?
Right. I think my style really hasn't changed. I mean, who I am, and changing doesn't come across as authentic. So I try to be as transparent. I view my role as a leader is to get the roadblocks out of the way for my teams. So, the success that our recruiting team has had at Huron is clearly my team. I'm kind of the quarterback, but I give all the credit to the team that has done the heavy lifting to hire, 800 to 1,000 people a year. But I think the leaning in is making sure that anyone who's managing someone on the team is having regular check-ins, if not daily, every other day. Also being clear and transparent about what we know and what we don't know. And I think one thing that our leadership team has done really well, and I've been very intentional about, is being honest and addressing whatever the concerns are. Because obviously people are concerned, do I have a job? Will I have a job? how stable is the business, what's it going to look like now, what's going to look like the end of the year, and just leaning in and sharing what I know and what I don't know, I think makes others feel more comfortable.
Yeah. Well, and I think for a lot of folks right now, especially if you are in talent acquisition, the pipelines dried up, right?
Right.
Most budgets have been kind of either frozen or at least halted, and organizations aren't sure, like, what do we do with this talent? So what have you said or done to address those fears or anxieties in your team?
Right. So we actually addressed that from an HR perspective, and we were looking at, what are all the projects that are currently going on across the HR team in a good state of mind. But then now that things have pivoted, what are the most important initiatives that we need to focus on, and who needs help? And the TA function within our organization, and probably within every company, is the one group that's kind of sitting on the bench looking for something meaningful to do, aside from house cleaning, making sure your applicant tracking system or your CRM systems are clean. You're addressing some of the easy low-hanging fruit. We started working on a list of our priorities, both from an enterprise HR perspective and then from a TA perspective. And then we prioritized them. And it took a while to get everyone on the same page. And we came to the realization that my team is the farm team, so I've got resources that could be deployed as needed. And so we started working on that. And then the other part of this component is, as a leader, you really need to understand the capabilities of your team. Having a small team is fairly easy to understand that, but when you have a larger team, then it's really making sure that we understand the strengths and weaknesses of everyone, so that when you pull resources into an engagement or a project, then they're asking or offering meaningful assistance versus put someone that doesn't have any experience in that space. It's more painful to put that new resource on that project than not. So part of that is really understanding during the one-on-ones on what do your people like to do, what are their strengths, what are their aspirations, making mental notes of that. And then as these projects come up, trying to align the resources to the need in a more meaningful way.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is you're kind of offering, one is you're really targeted in identifying either projects or opportunities that are aligned to business priorities.
Right.
So you've got a focus on, I'm going to find ways to get my recruiting team realigned to kind of leverage the benefit of the company.
Right.
Do you have any examples of that? Like what have your people been doing, to kind of not to stay busy, but stay relevant?
Yeah. So we have a number of talent and culture initiatives that we're working on. And one of them is personalization of the employee experience. And one of the strategies there is we've secured LinkedIn Learning. So we have that whole platform of all these training sessions. And I think there's, thousands of them that are on their platform. But just turning that switch off and telling our employees, if you're not busy, think about your professional development and go find training that's applicable. We wanted to be more prescriptive around, based on your level and your function, these training programs be relevant for you. So we've been taking some of our coordinators, and they've been working on this task force to review the training courses and align them to the levels and competencies. And so that's one initiative. One initiative that I'm leading is a contingent worker strategy. So historically, we've had temporary workers in our organization of 4,000. We probably have 200 people that are some type of contingent worker, but the process isn't really owned by one stakeholder. You've got legal that represents the compliance piece. You've got my team that helps with corporate staffing. We've got consultants we're bringing in from third parties. So we thought this was a great opportunity to kind of define what our approach would be and figure out what are the bottlenecks and work with the stakeholders to fix it. So pulling people into that. And that's more enterprise-wide. So I'm pulling in resources across our legal group, technology. And in the middle of that, we're in the process of implementing Workday. So there's a lot of work being done in that vein, but it doesn't really include all of the contingent stuff. So that's a huge project. And then there's diversity strategy is one thing this is a great time to really look at what channels you should be going to find diverse talent, but how do you operationalize that within a TA team? We've always said focus on creating a diverse slate if at all possible. In our space, it's very difficult to do that. So we're being more intentional about helping the recruiters develop those diverse pipelines. So those are a couple of examples.
I love it. I mean, what I'm hearing is, you've identified very specific targets and projects to leverage the talent.
Right.
And I think TA folks have a unique perspective because they know the breadth of the organization. They also have probably that research skill set that makes them relevant. And they know how to problem solve, right? Because they know how to work within deadlines. So
yeah.
I'd love to dig in just a little bit more on what you were sharing in regards to pipelining, because I think that, what sometimes people assume if you don't have active searches, there's not much work to do. So I'd love to kind of get a sense of, what are you doing or leading strategically to really kind of help position your company and your TA team to be ready when you're ready to hire again.
Right. So from a talent mapping or a pipelining perspective, there's probably nothing different that you should be doing now versus what you should always be doing. The reality though, when you're in war and you're looking for resources and you don't have much time to be really strategic about it, you find the talent where you can find it, and you don't spend a lot of time strategically thinking about where have we won, where we had the most successes, and looking at those organizations and trying to identify networks of people that, first of all, understanding where we've had the most success, and then targeting your strategy toward that. The other part is if we have the luxury of having a couple of really great sourcers. We've also been spending time having sourcing sessions, like a sourcing happy hour, where we brought together a representative from our executive recruiting team, our senior sourcer that's great at digging up and finding talent, and one of our corporate sourcers. And they put together a webinar for the team, which was fantastic. And it gave the team, those that were rusty on, how to go do it, some tools and techniques and tips to do it. And it also kind of broadened everyone's perspective, rather than thinking, it's just one person has that capability. There's 3 or 4 people on the team that are experts and can take advantage of that. We've also, many vendors are coming to us and saying, we can offer you free sourcing classes. So I've had some of the recruiters go through that and document what they're learning. And now we're posting that on our team site. So we're creating collateral that when you want that type of knowledge and expertise, you can kind of go to the library and pull out what you need to get smarter on the subject. And then the last thing I'll say is that I also, throughout my career, I've never relied on others to give me the training I needed. I always tried to seek it out. And so if you're feeling that your organization doesn't have the infrastructure in place, doesn't have a sourcing team, there's a lot of things you can do individually by just going to various sites, SourceCon and others that are providing free collateral, YouTube, to get smart on how to find talent.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm hearing, there's this big emphasis on, reskilling or upskilling, so let's make sure that in this downtime, we've got, we're sharper and better off when we get on the other side of this.
Yeah, and then there's another part, and I know we talked about it earlier or in other conversations around how to build that external network of contacts that I think is really valuable to not only get insights when you get stuck, but as you progress in your career, there's going to be a lot of problems thrown at you that you've never seen before, and you need that external network to help get you smart quickly, and that's helpful too.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about is if you're a younger manager or emerging leader, you've just now maybe in the last 2 or 3 years had the chance to start testing your leadership bench strength, and then COVID happens. This has been a difficult time for folks. And I'd love to hear from your perspective, what advice you'd offer.
I think, others are looking for you to have that voice of reason and give clarity as to what's happening and where we're going. So you don't have to have all the answers. And sometimes it's when you've given a problem, you bring teams together and you say, this is our challenge. These are some of my suggestions, but I want you to help me figure it out. And so I think, as a new leader, oftentimes you think you got to take it on your back. And the reality is you don't get anything done without a team approach. And by leveraging the resources, and the insights can come from a coordinator, it can come from a junior sourcer, it can come from a lot of different people, because oftentimes they were in another role or experience from prior to joining your organization, and they all bring something unique. One example of a project we did immediately when COVID happened, I was feeling like the TA team needed to do something to show that we were contributing to helping. And when we started to learn that it was first 5 million layoffs, and that was 10 million and 20 million, and it's higher than that now, we got a core group together to create a job search toolkit. And it would be a tool that we wouldn't promote as a part of Huron putting in the marketplace, because we thought that was kind of like touting, hey, we're trying to help. It was really intentional about helping people that were impacted within our organization. So one of my recruiters, his spouse lost the job, and then his sister-in-law lost the job, and she came from the hospitality industry. So we thought about, there's a lot of toolkits out there that tell you how to find a job, but in a situation where find a job that pays money, that's the goal. How do we help people ramp up quickly? Where would I go to look? And then provide our recruiters as a resource if they needed help. So we got that done in 2 weeks. We partnered with our marketing team to clean it up, and we published it, and it's now being shared throughout the organization, and our employees are grabbing that and using it, for their loved ones or friends as appropriate. So it made those involved feeling like they were helping and doing something really useful. And it got, and the people that were involved in that initiative, different types of background. One was a campus recruiter, one was a technology recruiter, one was our corporate recruiter. It turned out the campus recruiter came from a marketing job at a credit card company beforehand, so she kind of had the marketing prowess. So it speaks to really understanding strengths and weaknesses of your team, so you can plug them into the right type of engagement to help out.
Yeah, I love what you're offering here. And I think, everyone's searching for a way to make impact and create meaning. And I think for your employees, I can't imagine what the response has been to know that, Huron's here for you.
Right. It was very helpful. But then there's another part of this is that not all of our team members can participate in the same way. So I've got a lot of, I think we had 5 new babies on the team within the last year and a half. So that's like 4 people, one had twins, that are dealing with newborns. They're not able to get childcare. They may or may not have working spouses. So their world is like totally disrupted at home. And as a leader or a new leader, you really want to be sensitive to that. And the expectations might be different for someone like that that's dealing with some personal stuff, that we just have to give people a break and kind of take a chill pill that the job will get done. We can always pull in more resources, but be sensitive to what's going on at home is really critical to this as well.
Yeah, I think what you're offering is this, the challenge of being present and building empathy as a leader. And, I think sometimes when you're an emerging leader, you want to be fair to all. And that desire for equity sometimes means that you can't personalize or customize your approach. So, I'd love to just, if you could build off of that, just like for either both from a perspective of advice or for you managing, varied needs, how have you adapted to that?
It helps having a larger team. If I had a smaller team, that would be a little bit more challenging. So I have more resources to move around. But I think that's just the culture of our organization. And I didn't think of this stuff like overnight. I've been fortunate to work in an organization where we have really dynamic leaders, and I'm a student how other people lead. So when I see other people do something really good and effective, then I should add that to my toolkit. And I kind of had that in my DNA since I started out in recruiting, because I didn't really come from, I think all of us that get in recruiting don't have a background in HR. Some of us do, but I came from a sales background, and I think learning and having other people with a lot more experience and expertise and spending a lot of time with them, asking them questions on how do you solve for this type of problems. You make a lot of mistakes along the way. I remember years ago, I was in a new management role, and I came up with this really creative new sourcing strategy. I don't remember what the strategy was, but I was going to put people in different roles and align it differently, and came up with the idea, got the team together and rolled it out. And I had like 4 out of 5 people said, this is a bad idea. How's it going to impact this? And I didn't do any stakeholdering and all the things you do before you roll out a new initiative. And then I realized that if I'm going to be successful, I need to take a team approach rather than a me approach. And I think that helps along the way as well.
Yeah, I think what you're offering, and I've heard of a lot of either organizations or leaders who are struggling with probably taking more of an autocratic approach to their work, and they have typically been the delegator or, the task assigner. And now they're in the space where they have to leverage more from a team perspective. And so that seems natural for you. For somebody where that's not so natural, what do you recommend they kind of, do or consider to kind of shift more towards a team orientation?
Well, I'm always, reading and any topic related to leadership, management, operational excellence. I've always been a student of that kind of stuff, and it intrigues me. So I either try to find thought leaders that do that well. I talked about creating an external network. So I'm involved with Society of Talent Acquisition and Recruitment, and I've been involved with that group for, I'd say more than half my career. And the reason was to create relationships with other people that are struggling with the same things that I'm struggling with. So that's helpful. The other thing is that if I were just to personalize it for everyone who's working with an organization, your insights don't necessarily have to come from recruiting people. They can come from other people within your organization. It might be an HR generalist or an HR business partner. It might be someone in the marketing department you've developed a relationship with. It could be someone in IT. And build relationships throughout your organizations with people you think that do it well, and have coffee with them or have a Zoom happy hour with them and say, you do things really well. I wanted to get to know you. And I think people are willing to open up and help. New ideas.
Yeah, I think, the asking for help, is really at the end of the day important. If you know that this is an area of growth, then seek out the support or seek out the education. It's kind of what I'm hearing.
I've worked in organizations and I've had bosses, hopefully none of my former bosses are on this call, but some were very dictatorial about if you brought them a problem, it was very painful working through it. Whereas if you found someone that was like if there was a transparent leader, like I want my people to tell me what's working, but more importantly, I want them to tell me what's not working and where they need help. And the more they do that, the more comfort that, hey, we really want to solve the problem and win, versus it's a demonstration that you're not capable of solving the problem. And I know that if I spend time with someone to help them solve the problem, the next time it comes up, I don't need to spend time there. I can spend it somewhere else. And so having that type of transparent relationship about what's working, what's not, where do you need help, enables a leader to be more effective. So that's probably the number one thing I would recommend for junior leaders to be comfortable doing.
Yeah, being able to really seek the feedback and solicit the discussion, but really be on the same side of the table.
Exactly.
When it comes to solving the problem versus on the opposite side.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. What do you think, as we look forward to the recovery years or months that we're going to be facing?
Yeah.
What do you think that leaders today need to be paying attention to as far as how their actions today may impact, their ability to recruit or retain talent tomorrow?
Yeah. So retaining is really the key, because and just before this happened, there was a scarcity of talent in the world of professional services and consulting. Most of the new talent is either coming from campus recruiting at the entry level, or it's borrowing resources or taking resources from your competitors. And so when the market is moving, especially in the technology space in the newer areas where there's a scarcity of talent, it means you're going to have to invest more in your people. And that's why I think a lot of organizations are really focusing on internal training and upskilling and getting smarter, and then leveraging contingent workers appropriately, and then rethinking the old paradigms, because it's clearly that most organizations as they come out of this are not going to be going on premise into an office, at least for a period of time until it's safe. And even if, right now the government in some states is saying it's safe, but as an employee, as a father, as a mother, as a son, you really don't feel comfortable getting on a train and going downtown, or, dealing with the hassles of that. So you got to really be sensitive to that, but to also think about, all right, in that new paradigm, how would things look differently? And I think it actually opens up the gates a little bit. And now that we can go a little bit broader on finding talent wherever it exists versus being tied down to location, I have to have a team in Chicago or New York, versus I can hire that person anywhere and get the best talent to fill the job. So it's going to change the paradigm a bit.
Yeah, I think there's, what I'm hearing is, there's the reskilling component, and really,
Right.
I think a lot of organizations are actually cutting their talent at their training and development right now. You know, they're saying this is an optional factor. And what I'm hearing you say is, no, this is the time to double down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the other part about rethinking those paradigms, you know, I think there is probably an aspect of every part of our business that's under review as far as how we operate.
Right. So then from a, you didn't ask this, but from like a TA functional perspective, what value do we bring to the table? It's no longer just about finding the talent, but it's giving visibility into the pool of talent that's available so that the business leaders can make the right call. You know, the recruiters by nature are pleasers. We want to win when we get the right person, you know, person in the seat. But there's situations where it doesn't make sense to do that because it's going to take too long. So oftentimes we're worst enemy from the standpoint of putting barriers in place that, you know, we know we're not going to be successful, or it's going to take 6 months to fill a position. Then we should thinking about maybe it's a contingent worker, maybe it's about maybe that we need to acquire talent in this space and having a more strategic conversation with the business. So if it's not the recruiter because maybe you're too junior or feel like you don't have enough experience having that conversation, bring in other leaders to help you make that case. But show them data about what you're finding in the marketplace that helps support it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really important call out when you think about how TA shifts. And, you know, one of the other parts is the more relational and less transactional component of the work.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So although I function in a recruiting role, I think of myself as really someone who has a pulse of what's going on in the marketplace. And recruiting is very similar to sales, and the same things that occur in the sales space occur in the recruiting space. So you can leverage some of the best practices around market intelligence, where we're winning, where we're losing, win-loss reports, and then using those insights to help the organization make the right call from a business perspective. So it's important that if you're not you as a recruiter, but someone within the recruiting team is having those conversations with the business to really understand where they're now and where they're skating to, so that when we see opportunities to help them hire senior talent quicker or do a tuck-in acquisition, that you're able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the win-loss reports are something that I think every TA team should be kind of holding themselves accountable with.
Right.
At the end of the day. We're going to pivot to some questions, and I received a whole bunch through those who had RSVP'd. So I'm going to start with a couple of those, and then we'll kind of go to the chat. So one of the questions that I thought was really just relatable, probably for all of us right now, was, you know, I'm going to rephrase it for the person who submitted it. You know, I'm feeling very drained right now as a leader, and it's hard for me to bring that level of energy that I know my team needs right now.
Right.
What do I do?
So we talk a lot about balance, and we have, you know, and even with that, as a TA leader, you feel at times you're kind of holding a lot of it on your shoulders because you're shielding your team from some news you may not want them to hear, or so I understand that pressure at times that you feel, but it's making sure that you've got someone to talk to about it. And so you should be talking maybe to your direct manager, whoever leads the function. If you've got a relationship with your boss or some other leader in the organization, saying, hey, are you feeling the same thing? How are you feeling? Yeah, addressing it. You know, taking time for yourself. If there's a stressful week, then, you know, take time off. We actually been promoting that within our organization, that what does it mean to take PTO now, because there's no place to go. And so we started messaging it on our corporate call that it's okay to take time off if you feel you need a break. And because we're going from call to call, and it's and then you're immersed in your family, so there's no break of the commute home or what have you. So you got to find ways to, in your own way, to get balance. Fortunately, my wife pulls me out and we take a walk every day, and every morning she says, when's your break today? And we take a walk around the neighborhood, and at least that's one release that I have that gets me out of the office and off Zoom calls.
Yeah. You know, I've had clients who are starting to add those walks at the end of the day. So they kind of check out or click out of their
Right.
their job. They go for a walk and then they commute back home, just to create that distinction in time.
Right.
Because it is hard, you know, when where you live is where you work, and you know, you can always be on, and just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right. So, you know, a lot of people are doing happy hours. I mean, I've done more Zoom calls with family and friends, and I think finding ways to, you know, include that in your week, I think helps take the pressure off too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's great advice. And, you know, really what I'm hearing is a theme of self-care. You know, you have to be in a spot to care for yourself in order to manage yourself. And if you're not managing yourself, you're probably not going to be really good at managing others. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Another question that came up was advice for recruiters who are struggling. So you manage the TA team, and, you know, when your recruiter struggling connecting or engaging with a hiring manager. So people are experiencing a ton of pushback right now, and they've articulated it either as, you know, the hiring manager doesn't really want to hire, or maybe they're just being resistant, or they're not adapting to a virtual interview model. What do you do?
Well, with anything new in adaptation, you got to find a win somewhere. So whether it's now or, you know, like when we've rolled out new interview frameworks, and then some groups were very, it was harder to and get that up and running. We would look at the groups that we had success with, and oftentimes you can bring them in and give them as the example. So typically when someone's resistant, you got to find out why they're resistant. And sometimes it's time, sometimes it's they don't have credit, but they don't believe that whatever you're recommending is the right solution. So it's really peeling it back and figuring out what's the root cause of that. Maybe they don't feel that you're a credible stakeholder. And so how do you build that? And so there's a lot of different tactics you can take to do that. But, you know, continuously figure out what are the gaps. So do you think it's a communication gap that they're just, it's how you're presenting the case, or do you think it's just, no, this is just a difficult person? So who else is dealing with that difficult person? It might be an HR business partner. So that might be someone you go to and say, hey, I'm having a tough time with this individual. We're trying to win here. The other thing that's sometimes helpful is if you've got a relationship with that individual's boss or boss's boss, and if there's a strategic initiative to hire X number of people within a period of time, and you're getting blocked by the hiring manager, then I would think that their boss or boss's boss would want to know about that. And so that might be a conversation where you give that information to your manager, and maybe it's elevated to someone like me, and then I go have that conversation and see if we can get the bottleneck out of the way.
Yeah. Well, and the other part too is sometimes when you're a junior recruiter or someone who's kind of hasn't built that bench strength or confidence yet, or agency internally, you can, you know, you're nervous to raise it to a Paul, right? To say, hey, I need some support and or kind of allies here.
Right.
But the risk there is that, you know, you're doing a lot of busy work without really any results.
Right. So, you know, we are all resources that are nicely paid to do what we do. And if to show value, and the assumption is that you're good at what you do. Most recruiters, if you've been doing this for 6 months to a year, you have more experience than your hiring manager and going out and finding the talent. So you bring some expertise to the game. But if there's a gap somewhere, then bring in someone a little more senior that's had experience working with difficult people. And it could, you know, when you raise the issue, it's usually what you hear is, oh yeah, he's or she is really difficult. And then it's a matter of, when I deal with a difficult person, I don't bring the emotion into the fact that they're difficult. I bring the issue of what you asked me to solve for. You asked me to solve for filling this position within the next 30, 60, 90 days. This is what I'm proposing. If we can't do this, I'm not going to be able to hit my objective. Is there someone on your team that might have more time to do it? Because I know how to do this. I know how to win, but there's some key things that we need to do in order to do that. And sometimes that's pretty direct, and maybe it's someone with a title that needs to have that conversation if you're not comfortable having it. But after you do it a couple of times, you'll get more confident in saying, the objective is this. In order to be successful, we need to do this. Can you help me solve for this? And sometimes that conversation gets your hiring manager thinking of you differently. And then they respect the fact that you're taking time and energy to solve their problem, which is find the best talent.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you're offering, which is find the best talent, lead with the solution and like, you know, drive towards what is the goal we're trying to solve for. And, you know, I loved what you said, find the win.
Right.
You know, it's great piece of advice. What do you, you know, kind of reflecting on our conversation so far, what do you want people to get away from this conversation? If you could leave them with any kind of, you know, piece of advice, what would that be?
Yeah. I think it's no matter where you are in your career, you should always be striving to get better and to be more well-rounded and to understand the business and stay close to the business and understand how things get done. And the more you understand that, and the more you understand who does what, when you find a roadblock or been given a project that you've never done before, you have people and resources you can talk to give you a framework on how to address the problem. And then the other idea is just about building that external network of other people that do what you do, because recruiters are really helpful and networking type of folks. I can pretty much reach out to any recruiter and say, hey, we were in the same space. I'd love to find out more about your story and build a relationship. Most people are going to return the call, and you know, you start with that. And then I know that recruiters are calling in, or leaders are calling in from all over. In each city, major hub, there's usually some type of talent acquisition recruiting organization, which is great to get plugged into to find like-minded people. And then you start building relationships that help you solve for the problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hearing, you know, make sure that you tap into your resources, you build a community, and that you are committed to kind of continuous learning.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know, what's your dream for the post kind of COVID world? You think about what you hope we learn from this experience, either as a people, a humanity, a business.
Yeah, I think we've already changed. I mean, I think everyone appreciates connectivity with people more than ever before, because we're all kind of isolated. So I think how you operate when you've got a problem, it's not about pointing fingers, it's about let's solve the problem. In community, sense of community that together we can solve anything. So I know that a lot's going to change after, you know, all this opens up, and I don't think anyone has kind of a roadmap. We actually have a group in our organization called Insight, and their focus is around disruption and innovation. And one of their main mantras is, what's the job to be done? And so I think what most organizations are trying to figure out is what's their value proposition, what's the job to be done, what service do we really offer the market that differentiates us in a meaningful way. And it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves, you know, over the long term.
Yeah, I think, you know, what I'm hearing from you is we're all kind of in this state of reprioritization.
Right.
You know, and so we're learning kind of as a community and as a population what matters most to us. And the companies who are going to win are the ones who are listening.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I'm fortunate. I work in an organization that is service-based, and we, you know, the work that we do impacts society in a really meaningful way. And I think every organization has to find that. And even those that are struggling, because, you know, the airlines industry and hospitality, I'm sure they're going to rethink how they deliver what they deliver, and it will look differently. So it's going to be interesting to see how we evolve out of this thing. The one thing that I said to my team early on, when there were so many unknowns during that week 1, week 2, was that, you know, the United States is really resilient. And if you think of war times and all the bad experiences that we've had through 9/11, and times where you thought, oh, this was the end, and we've come out stronger. And I think this is one of those situations in our generation that's going to be really pivotal, and I think we'll all come out stronger.
Yeah, I think humanity is still going to win on this one.
Right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining in the conversation.
Thank you. It's been great.
It's been wonderful. It's been really wonderful. And I hope everyone who joined in really got all these nuggets of wisdom over the last 45 minutes. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Everyone.
All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye.